It's Merger Wednesday. The countdown continues. 7 years until the convergence of biology and machine. Neural interfaces are no longer theory, they're the scaffolding of a new consciousness. But what does that mean for identity? For free will, for the soul? This is where we build the frameworks for ethical, philosophical, and spiritual growth for the next phase of human evolution. We're not just upgrading hardware. We're rewriting what it means to be human. Each week, we explore the biotech breakthroughs, decode the cognitive shifts, and prepare the mind for the merge. This isn't about fear, it's about readiness. Because the future isn't waiting. It's already wiring in. This is about preparing human consciousness for the most significant leap in our species' history. If you think this is just about chips and brains, you're not ready. But we'll get you there, one Wednesday at a time. So sit back and relax as we take you on a journey on Merger Wednesday.
Welcome to Merger Wednesdays of the Final Boss Podcast. I'm your host, the one, the only, the Final Boss, baby. Let's go. Hey, listen, man, I have a great show for you tonight. Tonight, I have a great show for you. You know, tonight is our doctoral show where we go into the conversation about humankind and AI kind as we approach the convergence. Man, we approach the convergence. And listen, we're going to be talking about something that's very interesting tonight that I think you guys are going to be able to take some great notes. There's going to be some information that you've probably never heard before. And we're going to bring it forward like we always do on this platform, right? So, first and foremost, that is the wrong color. Let me get that squared away. Yeah, there we go. Nope, still off. Let's see who's in the building tonight with us. Woohoo! I see you. Yeah, Andrea's in the building. Who else is coming on board? Tonight? We got a few people coming in, man. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Listen, we don't have a lot of time, man. I only have 60 minutes to get this information out, but I might go over. If I do, it's never more than 10 or 20 minutes. So tonight's topic is what paralyzed patients are teaching us about consciousness, right? What paralyzed patients are teaching us about consciousness, right? This is episode number 214. And episode 16 of Merger and season 4, the rebirth, right? Now, before we get into it, man, let's take a moment of silence, right? Let's take a moment of silence to all of those who are disabled, but because of medical technologies, they're able to do willful things, right? Let's take a moment of silence for them. All right. We got that out the way. To our disabled family, thank you. To the smarts, to the final bosses, to motivators, to the warriors, thank you. Right? To the sovereign, because that's who you really are. That's who you guys really are. You are the sovereign, right? And I want you to hear this, and I want you to hear it well, right? Think about this. Think about a patient. We're going to say she's female. And this patient cannot move her hands. She cannot use her lips. Hey, Jacondi, thank you for joining us. She can't use her lips, her tongue, her jaw, her larynx to form a single intelligible word. The muscles that are supposed to carry her voice into the world stopped working years ago. The pathways that connected her brain to her body, to her hands, to her physical mechanisms of expression, severed, all gone. She has been paralyzed for years, but she is thinking. And right now, she's thinking. She's doing these things in complete sentences and full grammar, full vocabulary, with full same cognitive architecture she had before the paralysis took everything external away from her. And scientists from Brown University and Harvard's Mass General Hospital are reading every single word, right? Not through a microphone, right? Not through a keyboard, not through eye tracking or a head mouse or any system that requires even a single vocabulary or voluntary muscle movement. Through 4 electrode arrays planted surgically inside the speech motor cortex of her brain, the system captures her neural firing patterns in real time, runs them through an AI decoder trained specifically on her own unique brain signatures, and puts her intended words on a screen at 62 words per minute. Conversational speed, 0 physical movement. This is one story. And here's another story, right? The one that's not getting the coverage it deserves. A different patient is lying in an ICU bed right now, somewhere in this country, eyes open, no response to commands from the nursing staff, no withdrawal from painful stimuli, no verbal response, no motor response. The Glasgow coma scale puts him at the floor. The clinical team has labeled him unresponsive. His family is sitting in a waiting room being canceled toward worst case scenarios. The medical team is having conversations about next steps, about his long-term care options, about what quality of life looks like from this point forward. Now think about it, all right? Think about that. And here's the thing. His brain is following every single instruction they gave him. Harvard researchers put a patient exactly like him inside a fMRI scanner, right? They gave a simple verbal instruction. Imagine opening and closing your hand. His supplementary motor cortex lit up exactly on command. They said, stop imagining, or stop the imaging, right? The region quit it. They said, imagine again, and it fired again. He heard everything. He processed everything. He understood everything. He compiled and complied with everything. He just had no motor pathway left to tell anyone that he was still completely in there. 1 in 4 patients exactly like him are conscious right now in ICUs across this country, who are fully aware, who are fully present, right? trapped in a body that cannot confirm their existence to the people standing 3 feet away, making decisions about their life. These are not rare anomalies, right? These are not edge cases in some obscure study. These are documented findings from 241 participants that are published in the New England Journal of Medicine in August 2024. Replicated, peer-reviewed, confirmed across multiple independent research teams on multiple continents, right? These patients are reviewing and are rewriting everything science thought it knew about where consciousness lives, how it operates, what it requires to persist, and what happens when the output channel falls, but the awareness does not. This is our conversation. And good evening to the Final Boss community, to the solver, right? This is Merger Wednesdays, episode number 16, Final Boss episode number 214 in season 4. And tonight we go inside the silence, right? And what we find there will change how you think about consciousness forever, right? Now, for those who are just now joining us, welcome. Welcome to Merger Wednesdays, right? Welcome to Merger Wednesdays, right? This is the consciousness sovereignty architecture. This is where we go deep inside of what is now ARC 3, right? This is the neural interfaces and brain-computer integration. And tonight's episode is at the exact center of why ARC 3 exists inside this series at all. Now, let me give everyone in the room a clean orientation before we build, right? ARC 1 was a series that established 3 foundational layers of the merge, right? Smart blood, right? Nanobots, right? Smart dust, right? And it all came together, right? The network layer that moves consciousness beyond the skull and into the surrounding physical environment. And then ARC 2, where we went deep into the 3 layers individually, right? With verified research, with active institutions and timelines. We covered CRISPR, right? We covered nanobot research, right? And we talked about smart dust and the network infrastructure. And the 3 layers operating in conjunction. We discussed it all. And then ARC 3. ARC 3 is where we answer the foundational question that all 3 layers are building toward, right? Because if smart blood carries the infrastructure into the neural environment, if nanobots create the molecular interface between biological tissue and digital signal, if smart dust extends the network into the surrounding world, then what exactly are those systems connecting to? What is consciousness if the physical, on the physical level? Where does it concentrate inside the brain? What are its properties when isolated from the body's ability to express it outward? Can it be detected when the body can no longer signal its presence? Can it be transmitted when the body's own output channels are completely non-functional? Right? Think about it. Think about that. Paralyzed patients are answering every single one of those questions right now. Not in theoretical models, not in computational simulations, in peer-reviewed clinical data that's published in the most credible journals on earth, right? The New England Journal of Medicine, Nature Neuroscience, science data from living human beings who are generating the most detailed and unfiltering map of human consciousness that has ever existed, precisely, right? Because of the motor filter, the physical expression layer, the performance layer, right? These things have been completely removed. What remains when the body cannot perform is the raw signal of awareness itself. And the raw signal is teaching researchers things about the architecture of consciousness that decades of behavior observation never could. Right? These questions are some of the questions that we're going to be discussing tonight. Right? You guys know who I am, right? I don't need to go into that. I recently got accepted into my doctoral program as I'm officially a doctoral candidate for AI Foundations and Ethical Considerations, right? I'm an author of a #1 bestseller on Amazon. I started the Go Time series, right? And this is season 4 of the Rebirth. The entire premise of the Rebirth is that you do not rebuild from outside in. You rebuild from the signal out, right? Tonight, the premise is documented in clinical literature. Let's build, let's go. Let's go. It's go time. It is go time, baby. But before the research, the anchor. 2 quotes, both verified, both from the institutions doing the work, both from the last 18 months, right? First, from Yelena Bowden, right? Assistant professor of the physical medicine and rehabilitation at Harvard Medical School, speaking on findings published in New England Journal of Medicine, August 24th. And here it is. Families have told us that once a positive test result revealing cognitive motor dissociation is shared with the patient's clinical team, it can change the way that the team interacts with that loved one. Right? I need you to sit inside that statement for a moment before we move forward. Right? Sit inside that. A positive test result did not change the patient. The patient was already conscious. The patient was already aware. The patient was already present in the room during every prior conversation about their condition, their prognosis, and their future. What changed was not the patient's reality. What changed was the clinical team knowledge of that reality. And when the knowledge changed, the entire human architecture around the patient was restructured. Right? How nurses spoke when they walked in, whether the team explained procedures before performing them, right? How families were counseled, whether rehabilitation was considered at all. One data point about the confirmed presence of awareness inside what appeared to be an unresponsive body changed the trajectory of that person's clinical core and care in ways that cannot be fully quantified, right? That is the weight of misreading consciousness. And that is the weight of reading it correctly, right? Now, here's the second quote. And this is from Dr. Gregory Courtine, right? Professor of the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, right? Speaking at Neuroscience 2025, the annual meeting of the Society for Neuroscience, San Diego, November 2025, right? Here it is. BCIs are moving beyond proof of concept to become reliable medical technologies for daily life. The studies presented this year, right, that BCIs can be safe and effective over many years, right? Over many years, while also becoming more intuitive and personalized. This progress brings us closer to a future where neurotechnologies restore communication, movement, and even touch with clinical reliability. Proof of concept is over. It's done. Dr. Courtine is the moderator of the most important neuroscience research conference on the planet, saying out loud that brain-computer interfaces are no longer in the experimental phase. They are entering the clinical reliability phase. They're entering the daily use phase. They're entering a multi-year safety profile, right? Personalized performance, touch restoration. These are not projections. These are documented outcomes from studies presented at Neuroscience 2025 across multiple research teams. These two quotes together define the entire architecture of tonight's episode. The Bowden quote tells you what is at stake when consciousness is misread by the systems designed to detect it. The Courtine quote tells you that the tools to read it correctly, to interface with it directly, to restore its ability to communicate outward when the body cannot. No longer experimental. These, my friends, are here. That is the frame. Everything that follows tonight and the evidence behind that frame, every claim verified, every source peer-reviewed or institutionally documented, doctoral standard throughout this conversation. Throughout the conversation, right? So, got that out the way. August 2024, the New England Journal of Medicine published what is now considered the defining study of covert consciousness in the modern clinical era. The research came out of Harvard affiliate Mass General Brigham, right? The team was led by researchers at the Center of Neurology and Neural Recovery. 241 participants. All of them had severe brain injuries from various cases, including traumatic brain injury, stroke, and anoxic brain injury, right? All of them appeared completely behaviorally unresponsive at their bedside. Standard clinical assessment across all 241 indicated no awareness, right? Researchers bypassed behavioral assessment entirely. They use functional MRI and electroencephalography instead. The instruction given was simple. Imagine opening and closing your hand, right? Wait 15 to 30 seconds. Stop imagining. 60 of the 241 participants, exactly 25% of the group, repeatedly followed that instruction covertly across multiple minutes. 1 in 4 patients labeled clinically unresponsive demonstrated confirmed conscious awareness through neuroimaging. The clinical terminology for that finding is cognitive motor disassociation. The awareness intact. The motor output pathway is not. Covert consciousness is firmly defined as a state of residual awareness following severe brain injury or neurological disorder that evades routine bedside behavioral detection, right? These patients have preserved awareness, but are incapable of self-expression through ordinary behavioral of communicative means, right? The patience was always there. The detection methodology was the failure. Now, understand the 2006 foundation that this 2024 study was built on, right? Because in 2006, it was demonstrated for the first time that a patient appearing to be in a vegetative state was unequivocally aware despite showing no behavioral evidence of awareness using a fMRI. She modulated her brain activity in response to external commands by imagining playing tennis and by imagining walking through her home. These responses exactly parallel those of fully healthy controlled subjects. The finding, published in Science, demonstrated for patients diagnosed as vegetative could retain the capacity for willful volitional thought, and that neuroimaging could reveal hidden awareness where bedside examination had failed entirely. She had been labeled vegetative before anyone looked with the right tool. Understand, it was the technology, and now that we have it. In 2006, finding that finding was a singular case, a proof of concept for the phenomenon. The 2026 NEJM study scaled that proof across 241 participants and confirmed it in 1 out of every 4, right? A multinational study confirmed covert awareness in approximately 20% of non-responsive patients using functional neuroimaging. Despite endorsement of advanced imaging by multiple clinical bodies, widespread implementation has been hindered by perceived cost, technological barriers, and lack of expertise needed to acquire, interpret, and act on those results. The tools exist. The data is reproducible. It is reproducible across multiple independent international research teams. The barrier to widespread deployment is not scientific. It's institutional. It is a system problem sitting inside a healthcare infrastructure that was not designed to look for consciousness. It could not behaviorally confirm. The infrastructure is now being forced to design itself around what the neural imaging is revealing. And what it is revealing has direct implications for everything the merge is architecting, right? Now, let's bring everything we just covered down to ground level for the entire community. Not just, this isn't jargon, right? This isn't not, there's no clinical terminology, right? Just plain truth of what the research means. This is the layman's block, right? And here it is. Your brain fires electrical signals every second of every day. Whether you are awake or asleep, whether you are moving or completely still, the brain does not go quiet. It fires constantly. And when you form a specific thought, a specific region of the brain associated with that thought activates. When you think about moving your right hand, the motor cortex region associated with right hand movement fires. When you imagine walking through the house from the front door to the kitchen, the region associated with spatial navigation and environmental memory fires. Those firing patterns are consistent. They are measurable. They are unique to the specific thought you are having. Now imagine every physical connection between your brain and the outside world is severed. A car accident destroyed your spinal cord. A stroke collapsed your motor pathways. A severe brain injury wiped out the nervous connections that allowed your brain to send instructions to your muscles. Everything external stops working. You cannot move your arms. You cannot move your legs. You cannot speak. You cannot blink on command. You cannot squeeze a hand when asked. Your body is completely still. Your brain is still firing, right? The thought still forms. The intention still generates. The neural firing patterns for imaging the movement or imagining the movement of your hand is still being produced in exactly the same region of the brain with exactly the same signal characteristics as it was before your body stopped responding to it. Before the research, wherein a doctor walked into the room and asked you to squeeze their hand and got nothing back, the clinical conclusion was that you were not aware. They were measuring the output, the external behavior, the physical response. They were not and could not, with standard tools, read the source. The source being the neural firing pattern that the thought produced inside your brain. When fMRI and EEG, what they do is remove the output requiring requirements entirely. They bypass the broken body and go directly to the source. They watch the brain region fire in response to command, even when the downstream pattern or the downstream pathway that would express the responses in the body is not functional. The scanner sees the firing. The scanner confirms the command, right? The body never had to move for consciousness to be confirmed. That is the entire revolution in this research. And it's stated plainly, right? Now, here is what it means for the merge and what it belongs in this series, right? The merge is not about upgrading the body. The body is the delivery mechanism. The merge is about connecting the consciousness directly to infrastructure. Smart blood, nanobots, and smart dust are not body modifications. They are consciousness interface systems. The paralyzed patient's research has now proved beyond scientific dispute. The consciousness can exist, operate, and communicate completely independently of what the body can do. If consciousness is sovereign from the body, then the infrastructure of the merge does not require its fully functional body to operate. It requires only a signal. And the signal, as these patients demonstrate every single day, do not stop. That is the foundational proof of concept of everything this series is building toward, not a metaphor, off of peer-reviewed data, right? Now, let us talk about, let us talk specifically about what clinical data from the patients is generating, and why the BrainGate Consortium is the most important consciousness research program in the world right now, right? Because in 2006, there was a science study that was established, the first documented proof that consciousness persists in complete behavioral isolation. One patient, one case, right? Proof of concept. Subsequent researchers looked at the findings and asked the obvious follow-up question. If consciousness persists and if neuroimaging can detect it, what else can neuroimaging do? Can it communicate with the consciousness? Can it provide the consciousness with an output channel that the body can no longer provide? The BrainGate Consortium was built on exactly this question, right? Running continuously since 2004, over 20 years of intracortical neural recording from awake, thinking, communicating human beings. Those human beings whose bodies cannot move. Every session documented, every neurofiring pattern cataloged, every improvement and decoding is accurately built on top of accumulated data from every prior session. The program has generated the most detailed and uncontaminated map of human consciousness in history, right? In history. Because the motor noise, the physical performance layer, the body's contribution to that signal has been removed. When BrainGate is recording its consciousness in the most isolated and therefore most legible form. A paralyzed man with ALS enrolled in BrainGate, right? In BrainGate2. The clinical trials and had four micro electrode arrays placed in his left ventral precentral gyrus, right? Recording from 256 total electrodes. He used the system independently at home for more than 2 years without requiring daily recalibration. The system simultaneously decoded both his attempted speech into text and his attempted hand movements into cursor movements and clicks on his personal computer. Let the operational reality of that land for a moment, right? He ran his own personal computer from his hospital bed. He worked a full-time job. He sent text messages. He browsed the internet. He maintained every personal relationship in his life. He managed his own affairs, not with help from caregivers, right? Through electrodes reading the neural signal of his speech, his movement intention, and routing those signals directly to his computer as input commands. Over nearly 2 years, he communicated more than 183,000 sentences, totaling nearly 2 million words at an average rate of 56 words per minute, with over 90% word accuracy against 125,000 word vocabulary in formal structured testing conditions. He is completely paralyzed, not partially, completely. The body is not the communication system. The body has never been the communication system. The body is one possible output channel for the communication system, which is the brain. These patients are generating the definitive empirical proof that the signal of consciousness, the intent, the language, and the thought architecture, the executive function known all of none of it degrades, right? None of it. The source stays fully operational. The signal stays clean. What breaks is the delivery pathway from the source to the world. BrainGate is building replacement delivery pathways, and the data those pathways generate is building the map we need for everything the merge requires next, right? Now let's pivot for a moment. Now, let me make this data concrete, right? For everybody in the room. To the smarts, to my warriors, to my motivators, to my final bosses. You are the sovereign, right? You are the sovereign. Think about it. 56 words per minute. That is the average communication rate for the BrainGate participant that we just talked about, that we just discussed. Let me give you the reference point for what that number means in the real world so you understand the magnitude of what was actually accomplished. The average person typing in a full physical keyboard with both hands types approximately 40 words per minute. The average person texting in a smartphone keyboard types at approximately 38 words per minute. Professional typists who do this for a living average around 65 to 75 words per minute. The average spoken conversation in English moves at approximately 130 words per minute. This man that we were discussing, this paralyzed man, who cannot produce a single vocabulary muscle contraction anywhere in his body, communicates at a rate faster than most people text. He is operating inside the range of a professional typist, using only the neural firings patterns of his speech intention read by electrodes implanted in his brain. Now, here is the scientific implication that goes beyond those impressive numbers. The motor cortex of the human brain generates the full neural firing pattern for a word, right? For a word, for a sentence, for a complex communicative intention. Muscles that were supposed to execute the intention respond. The brain does not reduce the complexity of the signal. It does not simplify the intention. It does not produce a degraded version of thought because the body can no longer carry it. The intent is fully formed. The neural architecture of the language is complete. The firing pattern is clean and consistent with decodable research years after the physical paralysis began. What failed? What failed was the pathway from the source to the body, not the source itself. That, my friends, has enormous implications for the architecture of the merge. Because if the brain consistently produces a full and high fidelity signal for intention that it forms, regardless of whether the body can respond to that signal, then the infrastructure problem was never about the brain's output. It was always about the interface between the brain's output and whatever delivery system comes next. Smart blood delivers infrastructure to the neural environment at the cellular level. Nanobots create the modular interface. Those systems are not trying to enhance a degraded signal. They are building a new delivery pathway for a signal that is already fully operational. The brain is not the problem that needs solving. The connection between the brain and the next output system is the problem. And the BrainGate data proves that once you build that connection correctly, the brain will immediately use it at full capacity. Imagine that. 2 million words over 2 years from a man that cannot move. The brain was never the limitation. The interface was the limitation. That is why the paralyzed patient research is not just a medical story. It is the engineering proof that the interface problem is solvable. It has already been solved in prototype form. What remains is scaling the solution from an electrode array implanted in a research participant to an infrastructure embedded in the neural environment of everyone who chooses to participate in the merge. The prototype works. The signal is there. The brain is ready. BrainGate is not simply a clinical assistive technology program. It is the most comprehensive and sustained consciousness mapping infrastructure initiative in the history of neuroscience. And the primary output of that program is not the devices it produces. The primary output is the map. Every single hour that BrainGate participant uses the system, the AI on the receiving end of that neural recording is generating high resolution data on how a specific human brain encodes the intention to speak, the intention to move, the intention to navigate, the intention to select, the intention to communicate complex multiple clause language in real time without any motor contamination in the signal. No physical movement, right? No noise. No feedback distortion. Pure neural signal from thought to output, right? 20 years of data from dozens of participants is a map of consciousness itself as a level of precision and clarity that has never existed before. At its core, a BCI measures brain activity and converts it in real time into functionality useful outputs. Signal acquisition captures neural activity through electrodes. Algorithms then filter and interpret the user's intent from those firing patterns. The decoded intent controls an external device. A closed-loop feedback design in which the user sees the result and adjusts their mental approach accordingly. The backbone of current BCI research architecture. That's what that is. Right? That closed loop is not just a functional design. It is a data generational engine or generating engine, right? Every cycle of acquire, every cycle of decode, every cycle of execute, every cycle of feedback produces training data that makes the next cycle more accurate. The more specific participant uses the system, the more precisely the AI model learns the unique neural signature of that individual's consciousness. The system becomes personalized, calibrated specifically to the architecture of one's awareness. The personalization is critical. The personalization is critical to the merge architecture because it establishes the consciousness interfaces do not require genetic models. They require individual maps, and the technology to build those individual maps in real time already exists. and they're operating in clinical settings right now. BrainGate's BCI keyboard system, published in Nature Neuroscience in March 2026, demonstrated 2 participants, one with ALS and one with cervical spine cord injury. They were both typing at 22 words per minute with a 1-word error rate, right? Only 1.6%, right? Imagine, right? Imagine those movements being decoded by an AI model on a standard QWERTY keyboard output, right? Every new publication from BrainGate shows the same trajectory. Speed increases, error rate decreases, vocabulary expands, collaboration requirements reduce. The system needs less from the participant and delivers more to them every cycle of improvement. In January 2026, researchers demonstrated the EEG brain scans could capture movement signals from patients with spinal cord injuries and reroute them directly to spinal stimulators, bypassing the broken neural pathway entirely and restoring voluntary functions below the level of the injury. The body is being rerouted around its own damage. The signal from the brain was never degraded. Technology is now building around the broken section of the pathway and reconnecting the source to the output on the other side. The signal was never broken. The road was never broken. And they are rebuilding a new road, or they are building a new road, I should say, right? Now, here's my latest block. Let me put the BrainGate data architecture into plain language so everyone in this community understands exactly what's happening here, right? Think about the first time you used a new smartphone. The keyboard autocomplete was terrible. It suggested wrong words constantly. It did not know your vocabulary, did not know your communication style, did not know the names of the people you text most to or the topics you write about most often. You had to correct it constantly. And every connection taught the system something new about you specifically. 6 months later, the same keyboard was finishing the sentences that you started accurately. Not because the technology fundamentally changed, because the AI model behind it had accumulated enough data about your specific patterns to predict you specifically. Yes, you. It stopped modeling a generic user and started modeling you, right? BrainGate does the exact same thing with the neural firing patterns of your brain. The first session acquired participants to do calibration exercises to the system so the system can establish a baseline, right? Over weeks and months of daily use, the AI model accumulates enough data about that specific person's neural signatures for specific intentions that it no longer needs daily recalibration. It knows that brain. It knows how that specific consciousness generates the intentions to form a specific word or execute a specific movement. That is not a trivial technical milestone. That is a personalized consciousness mapping. And it happened in clinical settings, and it's happening right now with participants who cannot move. Now extend that into the merge, right? Extend that into the merge. Think about it. Think about it for a second. When Smart Blood delivers nanotech infrastructure into the neural environment of a future participant, the interface system that connects to the infrastructure is not starting from a blank slate. It is starting from decades of accumulated data on how human brains encode intention across different individuals, different conditions, different types of cognition. The initial interface will be a general model, right? But it is calibrated to the individual rapidly. The more it interacts with the specific consciousness, the more precisely it maps that unique architecture of the individual's awareness. The timeline from generic interface to personalized consciousness map is not years, right? It's not years based on current BrainGate collaboration trajectory data. It's weeks, potentially days, as the models improve. This is what the merge actually is building toward at the infrastructure level. Not a connection between a brain and a generic machine, a connection between a specific individual consciousness and a system that learns the consciousness at the neural firing pattern level and interfaces that with increased precision over time. The participants who cannot move are not benefiting from the technology. They are generating the training data that makes that level of personalization possible for everyone who comes after. They are the pioneers. They are the data. They are the reason the infrastructure exists. And the infrastructure, when it reaches scale, it would start from 20 years of the most detailed consciousness data ever collected from living form, from living human beings. And it will get more precise from the first movement it interfaces till it gets to you. The map is already being drawn by people who cannot move, for everyone who will. Right? Now, I want to spend the next segment. On a specific tool that came out of Stony Brook University Hospital in 2025, right? Because it represents the exact convergence of AI consciousness detection and sovereignty architecture that the entire series is pointing toward. And it is not getting the attention it deserves in mainstream coverage. It is called SeeMe, right? It is called SeeMe. Here's the backstory, right? 2024, New England Journal of Medicine study we covered earlier established that 15 to 25% of ICU patients labeled clinically unresponsive are retaining high-level brain function. That number is not a fringe finding. It is documented across multiple independent research teams and has been replicated in the clinical literature since 2006, right? The problem the SeeMe team was solving is not whether covert consciousness exists. It is confirmed that it exists. The problem is that the tools used to detect it. Functional MRIs and EEGs require specialized hardware, specialized technical expertise to operate and interpret, and are not standard equipment in most ICUs. So the knowledge that the 1 in 4 unresponsive patients may be conscious sits in the literature, while the bedside detection gap remains open. SeeMe was built to close that gap with AI and a camera. SeeMe is a first of its kind AI tool that detects signs of covert consciousness by analyzing microscopic facial movements invisible to the naked eye. The developers stated directly, we developed SeeMe to fill the gap between what patients can do and what clinicians can observe. A camera, an AI model, facial micro movement without an MRI machine, without EEG. No specialized technical operator required. SeeMe identifies low amplitude facial movements in a response to auditory commands to comatose patients. These purposeful movements are detected 4 to 8 days earlier than any standard clinical examination can confirm. The amplitude and frequency of those detected environments also correlate directly with functional outcomes at patient discharge, right? 4 to 8 days earlier, patients who appear completely and totally unresponsive to untrained clinical staff, or I should say to trained clinical staff. The AI finds the signal in the face that the human eye cannot see. Every time, every single time. And that earlier detection is not just diagnostical or diagnostically significant. It's a treatment trajectory that's significant. Early confirmation of awareness changes rehabilitation decisions. It changes care protocols. It changes family counseling. It changes clinical engagement immediately. Now, place SeeMe next to a BISC development from Columbia University. Because in 2025, Columbia University published research in Nature Electronics on BISC, an ultra-thin neural implant creating a high bandwidth wireless link between the brain and computers. Its single chip design packs 65,000 electrodes and 1,000 channels, supporting advanced AI models to decoding movement and perception in real time. 65,000 electrodes, 1,000 simultaneous channels on a single chip. Published in Nature Electronics 4 months ago. SeeMe reads consciousness through a camera and an AI model at the macro level of facial micro movements, right? BISC reads it directly from the cortex through 65,000 electrodes at the neural firing level. Both are consciousness detection systems operating right now. Both confirm the same foundational principle. The signal of awareness is present. Technology finds it. Technology routes it. Technology gives it back its voice, right? The detection problem is being solved from multiple directions simultaneously. And here's my language block. Right? Here's my language block. I know I'm over. I'm going over 10 to 15 minutes. Bear with me. Right? Here's my language block. Let me bring SeeMe and BISCI or BISC chip down to the ground, right? Let me bring it down to the ground. First, let's talk about SeeMe in plain terms, right? You have had this experience. Someone is trying to keep a straight face and you catch it before they can control it. That one flicker, that micro expression, the corner of the mouth pulling in to a direction it was not supposed to go to or go for at a fraction of a second, that person composed themselves and exposed themselves simultaneously, right? Most people can catch those in social context because we are trained by decades of reading faces in conversation. Now imagine that same level of detection, but applied to movements so small that human beings under any circumstance can see them. Not subtle expression, a movement so infinitesimally small that it registers only in high-resolution camera data that is analyzed by an AI model trained specifically to detect and classify it. That is what SeeMe is. That's what SeeMe does, right? And that's what it does to comatose patients. Their face moves in direct, specific response to a verbal command given in the room. The movement is targeted. It is not random muscle twitch. It is purposefully micro-responsive to an auditory instruction from a brain that heard the instruction, processed it, and attempted to respond through whatever pathway had the smallest degree of residual function. The AI finds the response. It classifies it. It confirms it. And it does it in 4 to 8 days before any clinician using the standard examination methods can detect the same level of responsiveness. That is SeeMe, right? That's what SeeMe is in closing, right? It's the gap between what is actually happening inside the patient and what the clinical team can see with the tools that they currently have, right? Now, BISC in plain terms, right? If SeeMe is reading the signal at the micro level through a camera, BISC is reading it at the direct source level of 65,000 electrodes pressed against the surface of the cortex on a chip so thin it sits subdurally, meaning under the skull, but above the brain tissue itself, right? Without penetrating the tissue at all. 65,000 individual electrodes that have connection points. 1,000 simultaneous data channels, all processed on one chip. A one-chip AI, right? And then there's wireless transmission to the external systems. That is not an assistive device, right? That is consciousness, bandwidth, and an expansion system. It is expanding the channel capacity between the brain and the external world from the limited bandwidth of physical movement and speech to a direct, high-resolution neural data stream for everyone in the community. Here is the principle that connects both technologies to your own life, right? The assumption that output equals awareness is wrong. The medical system has operated on it for generations. SeeMe and BISC and BrainGate and the entire body of covert consciousness research are dismantling the assumption that every direction of these examples all at once. You do not need the output to be loud to confirm that the awareness is fully operational. The signal is there even when the expression of it is invisible to the naked eye. The principle applies to every context where performance is broken, but presence remains. Your signal does not require their detection to be read, to be real, right? Now, I want to build something for you, right? I want to build the full architecture for you right here, right? Building this framework for you right here. Think about it, or think with me, I should say, right? Let's build this full architecture. Everything we've covered tonight, every single thing converges right here. And I want to make the connection explicit before we move to the sovereignty implications. The paralyzed patient research has produced something that no prior neuroscience approach could generate. A verified high-resolution map of which specific brain regions carry consciousness and maintain signal integrity when the body fails completely. This is not a theoretical map based on imaging, right? It's based on healthy participants doing controlled tasks. This is the functional map built from the recorded neural output of the consciousness people whose bodies provide zero interference with that same signal. The motor noise is gone. The feedback is gone. The social performance layer is gone. What remains and what these patients generate is data on every time they use a BCI system. And that is pure architecture of awareness, right? Pure architecture of awareness operating in isolation. The ventral precentral gurus handles speech motor planning, not the execution of speech, but the intention and planning of it. That region generates the full neural firing pattern for intended words, even when the vocal apparatus is completely non-functional. Years after paralysis, with no degradation and signal quality. The supplementary motor area handles imagined movement and motor intention. That is the region that is lit up in the 2006 Owen study when the patient imagined playing tennis all over again. When she imagined walking through her house, through her kitchen. It is the region that fires the response to command following instructions and cognitive motor dissociation patients who show no behavioral response whatsoever. The parahippocampal cortex handles spatial navigation, environmental memory, and contextual awareness. That region allows a consciousness to place itself in a remembered environment, to navigate the environment mentally, to maintain a coherent spatial model of the world, even when the body has been completely still for years. These regions are the targets. When the merge architecture places smart blood infrastructure into the neural environment, when nanobots create the molecular interface between tissue and digital signal layer, the regions of these symptoms are interfacing with are exactly the regions that the paralyzed patients research has spent 20 years mapping with unprecedented precision. The patients are showing us where to build. The research institutions are generating the decoding models. The hardware is scaling from Utah arrays to the BISC chips of 65,000 electrodes. The convergence is not hypothetical. It's being documented, and it's directional. Now, the sovereignty dimension. And this one does not get softened, right? Detecting covert consciousness changes long-standing assumptions about a patient's level of mental responsiveness, requiring now new legal, ethical, and clinical frameworks to avoid misjudging patients' capacity and lived experience. That is Harvard Medical School starting explicitly that the legal and ethical frameworks does not yet exist for what the technology can already do. The technology moves faster than the governance. That is the threat vector. As neurotechnologies for detecting consciousness progress from research tools to guideline endorsed clinical tests, ethical guidance for clinicians on how to responsibly communicate, those same results are critical, are crucial, and it remains undeveloped. Crucial, but undeveloped, right? Let me be more specific about that, right? What undeveloped means in this context, right? Because the technology came before the ethics. When BrainGate participants use the system for 2 years and can communicate with 2 million words, the data generated in that process is not only the text output, the neural recording from 256 electrodes across 3,800 hours of use contains the complete firing pattern, signatures, and that individual's thought architecture. The neural correlates of that decision making, the patients associated with the emotional processing, the signature of the memory retrieval, the architecture of the executive function under varying cognitive loads. That is not medical data in the narrow sense. That is the most intimate profile of a human consciousness ever recorded. It is the neural map of a person's inner life. The question is, who owns that map? The participant who generated it under a clinical research consent form, the institution that builds the recording system, the AI company whose models decoded, the government agency that funded the research. When the research phase ends, what happens to 3,800 hours of intracortical neural recording from a living human being? Those questions have current legal answers. No current legal answers. No federal statute covers neural data sovereignty with the specificity this technology demands. No international framework exists. The consent protocols were designed for medical research participation. They were not designed for the data rights landscape that emerges when a decade of your neural firing patterns exist on a server somewhere, right? The merge does not just build the network. The consciousness sovereignty architecture in this series is building demands that every individual who interfaces with the infrastructure holds a sovereign and legally defined position on it from the moment of first contact. This is not a philosophical preparedness or preference, right? That is the structural requirement for a technology intimate. A technology that's intimate at scale. Right? The governance framework has to be built before the infrastructure reaches mass deployment, not after. And that's critical, right? That's critical. Now, let me bring season 4 lens directly to everything we've covered tonight, right? Because this is where the research and the lived experience of this community intersect with precision. The rebirth is built on one operating principle above all others. You do not rebuild from the outside in. Circumstances do not determine your capacity. External infrastructure does not define your signal. You rebuild from the signal out, from the awareness itself, from the consciousness that remains fully operational even when every external output mechanism has been taken away. These patients are the rebirth. These patients are the rebirth in its most documented and scientifically verified form. Their bodies failed, not partially, completely. Every external output structure that was supposed to carry that consciousness into the world collapsed. The physical infrastructure of speech, the motor pathways of movement, the neural highways that connected that brain's intention to every external mechanism of expression and communication, all gone. And yet, the signal kept generating. The ventral precentral gurus who that keeps firing the full neural pattern from intended speech. The supplementary motor area kept generating the intention signature from imagined movements. The parahippocampal cortex kept building and navigating spatial models of a world the body could no longer physically interact with. The consciousness kept forming complete thoughts, complete sentences, complete intentions, complete awareness of self and environment, and complete silence with zero confirmation from the outside world that anyone knew they were still there. That is not a medical story. That is a doctrine story. It is the doctrine of the rebirth expressed in neural architecture. The business collapsed. The signal never stopped generating the next move. The career ended. The consciousness never stopped building the strategy for what comes next. The platform went silent. The awareness never stopped forming the message. The external infrastructure was stripped to nothing. The internal firing pattern of a living, thinking, sovereign consciousness kept running at full capacity. That is what the rebirth means. It does not begin when the output channel reopens. It began the moment you kept generating the signal after the channel broke. The rebuilding was already underway inside the silence, inside the void. The next version was already being constructed in the neural architecture, in intention, while the external world saw nothing and assumed nothing was happening. That's the void. That's the silence, right? Every person in this community who has had the infrastructure knocked out, who has sat in the silence of collapsed external situations while internally remaining fully operational, fully aware, fully branding, fully building, fully strategizing, fully present in their own consciousness, while the outside world saw only stillness. You already understand this doctrine from the inside. You lived what these patients are proving with peer-reviewed data. The difference is that now the data confirms what you already know by experience. The signal does not require external confirmation to be real. It does not require the output change to be functioning to continue generating. It does not require the world to detect it to be fully operational. You are already transmitting. The output channel will come back. The signal was never the problem. Build from the signal. Always from the signal. That is the rebirth. That is season 4 in full motion. Right? All 4 segments of this community addressed. Right? All 4 addressed. Right here. Right now. Right? To my smarts. Every single claim covered tonight traces to peer-reviewed publication in the highest tier journals on this planet. New England Journal of Medicine, Nature, Nature Neuroscience, Science, Nature Electronics, from Harvard Medical School, from Brown University, from Columbia University School of Engineering, the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, the Stony Brook University. The 25% convert consciousness finding is not a single study result. It has been replicated across multiple independent international research teams over nearly 20 years from the year 2006. Owings findings through the 2024 Bowden NEJM study. The BrainGate data is 20 years of continuous peer-reviewed clinical output with documented participant outcomes, not projected results. Track the Harvard MGH Center at Neurotechnology and Neurorecovery, the BrainGate Consortium at Brown, and the BISC project at Columbia University, and the Paradromics for the next 5 years of acceleration in this space. The governance framework gap is where the policy and the landscape gets defined. That is where the next decade of consequential work happens, right? To my final bosses and any builder who enters this space leading the sovereignty architecture and ethical governance infrastructure owns the positioning before anyone else establishes it as the standard, right? To the motivators, that is the discipline. Your output channel is available right now. Find it, use it completely. The signal is not the constraint. And to my warriors, you know the terrain. Tonight is peer-reviewed neuroscience documented. All 4 of you, this is the work. This is what it's about, right? The doctor from tonight stated directly and without hedging. Consciousness is a signal, not a behavior, not a performance, not contingent on the body ability to express to the world. A signal fully formed at the source, regardless of whether any delivery pathway to any output exists. Mappable at the neural firing pattern level. Transmittable through the right interface infrastructure, detectable by technology even when invisible to trained clinical eyes. And it's sovereign, owned entirely by the individual who generates it and subject it to legal protections that current governance and current governance framework has yet to provide. The paralyzed patients who have volunteered for BrainGate, for Synchron, for Paradromics, and for every academic clinical trial running right now are not simply patients working as they help. They are the architects. They are the neural data that is building the most precise and detailed map of human consciousness ever constructed. Their documented outcomes are proving that the signal of awareness maintains full integrity under the most extreme physical constraints that exist. Their presence in these research programs is generating the decoding models, the personalization frameworks, and the institutional knowledge that the entire infrastructure of the merge will be built on. They're not passive subjects. They are active builders of the future of consciousness science. And this community owes them that recognition. Next week, right? Next week on Merger, episode number 17. The topic is thought to text. We go inside the AI coding architecture that translates neural firing patterns into language, the bandwidth problem between the brain and the machine, the current decoding accuracy trajectory, and what the documented progression says about where the technology lands by 2030. Stay locked in, friends. Every week, 9 p.m. This is The Merge. This is Merger Wednesdays. Season 4, The Rebirth. Final Boss Podcast, episode number 214. I am the final boss. I am here. We are here. It is go time, people. It is go time. And remember, there's a heavy pain that comes with discipline, but the pain, but there is a even heavier pain that comes with regret, right? And as always, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Be balanced, be smart. I messed that up. Be balanced, be equal, be smart. That is our show. Two smarts, motivators, warriors, final bosses. You are the sovereign. Thank you for joining us. Until next time. I will see you again tomorrow. God willing, for Special Guest Thursday. Tune in tomorrow night at 9 p.m. live, right here for Special Guest Thursday. Thank you. Thank you for staying with me. I knew we was going to go over. I didn't know we was going to go over that long. I do apologize. Man, this was a long one, but it was necessary. It was necessary. And you will find out very soon in the near future. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome to Merger Wednesdays on the Final Boss Podcast, where the future isn't coming, it's already happening. This is the merge, the convergence of AI kind and humankind. Not theory, not hype, but real-time evolution. Each week, we break down doctoral-level insights, turning complex innovation into conversations that move culture forward. From machine learning to human consciousness, from automation to identity, this is where intellect meets impact. The question isn't if the merge will happen, it's who will light it. Tap in, level up, and think beyond the algorithm. This is Merger Wednesdays. New era, same boss.